in 3, 2, 1. Have you heard of the newest audio-only social media platform, Clubhouse, that went viral towards the end of 2020 and early 2021? If you dwell around entrepreneur circles, it is almost guaranteed that you have. The app that was launched in its beta version in 2020 for only iPhone users had a massive growth boost that had every entrepreneur, influencer, thought leader, and marketer going crazy, myself included. Our guest today was one of the first users of Clubhouse to hit 1 million followers and now is sitting at 2.2 million followers as of April 2021. His name is James Andrews. James has been working at the intersection of tech and culture since the 90s. He held senior roles at record labels, a fashion brand, tech startups, and advertising agencies. He is a former label executive from the LA, New York scene 90s hip-hop R&B golden era who worked at Columbia Records. He is currently the founder of Authenticated Ventures, a brand studio and investment advisory that leverages culture to accelerate opportunities and growth outcomes for their portfolio and partners. He is also the founder of the Authenticated, a membership community of 300 plus investors, founders, and creators. And James is a founding member of the Audio Collective, a hybrid audio creator community, production house, and ambassador group. Today, we're going to dive into James' past, his background, all the amazing things that he's done, and of course, chat with James about Clubhouse, the hottest new social media platform, and how one can maximize their business influence and network and influence for entrepreneurial ventures. James, welcome to the show, man. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. It's good to be here. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Honored to be on your show.
I'm glad to have you on the show. You and I had a chat about 6 months ago, getting to know one another, and it took a little while to get you on the podcast because you got so many things you've got going on. But thank you so much for chiming in with us today, and let's make a good show and talk about all the amazing things you've done in your life.
Great, appreciate it. Looking forward.
I'm really curious. Like we're gonna dive into some of the things you're doing currently, but first, like I've got to talk to you about the '90s hip hop scene. Like that, I'm sure was just so exciting and you were probably, I don't know. I'm guessing. I'm just gonna assume your age now. So in the '90s, you were probably in your 20s. Is that right?
That's
20,
right.
yeah. And so being in your 20s in the '90s hip hop scene, you had all the cool early rappers and hip hop guys and R&B during that time. Like I'm sure is very exciting. How did you get involved in that?
Well, I was going to UCLA, and my best friend's mother is Dionne Warwick, and so I got this early stage exposure to the life of celebrity world. Whitney Dionne Warwick, of course, has a niece named Whitney Houston. So spent a lot of time in that family, learning about the record business, and just became really passionate about wanting to work in the music business, but I didn't really know how to get in. And I thought you had to become an attorney. So I was working at an entertainment law firm, and I got an internship at Columbia Records in '92, and ended up, when you're an intern, you do everything. So I was, you know,
Mm-hmm.
putting crisscross clothes on backwards.
Oh
Uh,
man, I remember those days. I did that.
exactly. Everyone has that claim to fame.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I worked with Crisscross, Jermaine Dupri, and worked with sort of this early wave of artists, and the way the music industry works, especially back then, it was there was no social media, so it was all about relationships and building,
Mm-hmm.
true, authentic relationships. So while being a UCLA student, I just kind of was off campus a lot. Was in the kind of world of Hollywood and entertainment, and just found my way, via working part time in a law firm, but moonlighting, literally moonlighting, leaving the law firm and pretending I was using the bathroom and going to intern. I ended up getting an internship, and back then a lot of it was calling college radio stations because hip hop was only played at college radio. So a
Oh
lot of my
wow.
early days were spent talking to college radio stations, and then I ultimately dropped out of my last year at UCLA and kind of went to the record labels.
Nice, nice. What I've got to ask, whatever happened to Crisscross? Like what are they doing today? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm still close with Jermaine Dupri. Unfortunately,
Uh-huh.
one of the Chris's passed away probably about 3 or 4 years ago.
Oh man.
And yeah, so I would end up going to work for Jermaine Dupri's father at
Okay.
Columbia Records and take a really big position at Sony. So yeah, I
Uh-huh.
remained very much in touch with Chris Cross and actually worked on their last album. My role at Columbia Records was a marketer, so you end up becoming very close with the artist. And yeah, great kids. It was a great group.
Yeah. So nowadays I mean you've got all the ventures that you're running and you're
Yeah,
investing, you've got investors, you've got a fund going on. But I met you through a mutual friend, Dave Williams, who's also been on the podcast.
yeah.
And he was raving about the things that you were doing on Clubhouse, which
Mhm.
I've followed you for the past 6 months or so on Clubhouse and have just seen what you've been doing. It's been very, very impressive. And for the listeners that don't know, because Clubhouse is still a rough beta version, I guess, what people say, right?
Yeah.
And it's only launched to iPhone users. It's a social media app that's audio only, so you can chime in and listen to entrepreneurs and influencers like yourself. I listen to Naval Ravikant from time to
Hmm.
time on Clubhouse. Elon Musk chimes in there from time to time, Tim
Yep.
Ferriss. But also these smaller influencers in their niche. So if you run a community of, females that like to that are into shopping or into
Hmm.
knitting, or males that are into men's growth or something like that, or fashion. You can create these little micro clubs, and people can come in from all over the world, chime in and listen to
Hmm.
you. But how did you get involved with Clubhouse?
Well, in my role, so I advise a ton of startups and investors and family offices, and because I've been playing in technology for a long time, I end up having this kind of role and culture of seeing technology for the first time, being able to bridge between technology and my network, which is, several folks in the creative economy, whether it's artists, former artists, NFL players, former NBA players. We even have a princess in our network. So I end up playing this interesting role in culture as sort of a John the Baptist of technology, where I'm often called upon to bring folks into the network. So I got a call from Andreessen Horowitz, who ended up becoming the lead investor in Clubhouse, and in May, to be an early user of the platform, to bring some of my creative network to the platform,
Mm-hmm.
and just to kick the tires and spend some time on it. And so yeah, it was not my first time around the rodeo, kicking tires on a new platform. I was very early in Twitter. I was very early in Ustream, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting in a different position today, but I certainly was like, I definitely feel like this is something that I could bring my network to, and got in May and just started, really, really, I mean, thinking about my network, which I created off campus, off of Clubhouse, and how we could bring them into Clubhouse in a more authentic manner.
Right, that makes sense. So, question on new platforms.
Uh-huh.
So you were early on Ustream, early on Twitter, early on Clubhouse. I had a friend who saw I believe is the beta version of Instagram in San Francisco years ago, and shunned it. He was like, "Ah, this picture platform, social media, like that's gonna work." Right, and but then over the past 7 or 8 years, I would see people hop into a new platform, get
Hmm.
really big, it take momentum. Sometimes they would fizzle out,
Hmm.
those platforms, and sometimes they would take hold.
Yeah.
What are some things that you look for that you think, oh, like this is going to be a solid platform, and you really think like it's gonna go viral to the masses?
I think that's changed, and in many ways, I think being in the inside of Clubhouse and seeing the growth has made me even um, reimagine what that criteria looks like. It's a great question. I think that what's most impressive about uh, Clubhouse is the iterative nature that the founders have taken. They're in the rooms listening. They're in the rooms building the plane while the plane is in the air. And I think
Right.
that's really interesting as you think about product development, to have the founders pivoting and taking feedback and kind of like literally using the product, listening to the user feedback, and then putting that feedback into practice. So I think that question is answered for me, in new ways today. One is, are the founders, do they really understand user growth, and do they understand culture? I think what's also been fascinating about Clubhouse is Clubhouse doesn't become the platform it is with the early version of folks like us that were on the platform. I mean, there was certainly a bunch of business leaders and venture capitalists, but that's not what actually drove the what I call the those aren't the force multipliers of the platform. The force multipliers are many folks who have traditionally been shunned from early platforms, females, African Americans, Black and brown folks. That's really the engine that drove, it wasn't the celebrities. The celebrities actually have
Mm-hmm.
very little impact. It's the influencers who influence the influencers who are really the movers of that platform and take it, from $100 million valuation to $4 billion valuation. So to me, I'm watching, how do founders view the creative economy? How do they view you know, global markets? I think what's been really interesting is the growth of the platform in places I've spent a lot of time in. So Brazil and Germany and the Middle East, are all places in which I think have tremendous opportunities. And so, the app hit number one in Japan. The app is crushing it in the Middle East. It's massive in Australia. And I think watching how the founders have embraced the international growth with intentionality, I think is really important. And then I'd say that the last piece, which is the newest piece, I think as an investor, is how founders think about capitalizing their business, how they think about their cap table and what it looks like, who's on the cap table. It's There's a lot of capital in the market, so it's actually really fairly simple if you're, a well-decorated Silicon Valley Sand Hill Road soldier, to walk up and down Sand Hill Road and grab 5, 10, $20 million, right? Like
Right.
there's more capital than there are, there's a ton of capital in the market, especially the greatest transference of wealth we've seen, from generation to the next generation. So for me, what's most impressive these days is like how founders think about the distribution of equity across that. Is it full of just, the same old, or have they really thought about who represents that cap table, and how that cap table is congruent with the users and the executive team? So a lot of my work, I would say, in the last year in answering that question has been sort of thinking about cap table congruency, and thinking about like how that's important in the lifeblood of a company, almost the LTV as well. And I think as we look at things like tokens, the next uh, Clubhouse will probably be built on a less old school framework and more of a tokenized model, and that'll be a really interesting moment when we start to build in more fairness and equity across the cap table.
And for the listeners, can you define what tokenized model is exactly?
Yeah, so it's the blockchain. It's the
Mm-hmm.
ability to leverage, the blockchain and a public ledger, and the ability to leverage a token. We're hearing a lot about NFTs, which is getting a lot of the attention in the space. And I think we're in a very, you're hearing a lot about it. It's very kind of high. It's art. It's sort of these things, but that'll clear out, and we'll
Right.
start to see tokenization of other things, right? Like platforms, and we'll see tokens used in other ways. And I just think the future of capitalizing companies is actually in these non-traditional ways. In the same way Robinhood has disrupted the stock market, I think the venture world is going to go through a really interesting moment, both with tokens and with recent policy changes in Reg C, which is equity crowdfunding.
Mm-hmm.
The limits have been raised from 1 million to 5 million on unaccredited investors. And so I think that opens up the opportunity to get everyday average Americans, just speaking American voice right now, everyday average Americans the opportunity to participate in the growth of a company. And that's when it's game on. That's
Yeah.
when we're going to start to see, average Americans who have been shut out of the opportunity to invest because they're not accredited investors, which I think that those rules need to change a little bit. I think that we're going to see, the opportunity for companies to actually value their customers and say, hey, you know what? You've been a loyal customer. You've been a loyal fan. You've been a loyal friend of mine. And for that reason, I want to raise raise money from several folks who have just been loyalists versus a bunch of people who've gotten really rich on Sand Hill Road. I think there's a rise of the commons happening right now, and I think we saw a little bit of that in GameStop, and I think we're going to see more of that in the way companies are capitalized.
Can can Clubhouse, or do you see Clubhouse creating that, like implementing that into their platform as it is now, like bringing in the ability to exchange cryptocurrency or exchange, you know, have have the members be some sort of investors in the platform? Is this a possibility for what it looks like?
Yeah, I don't know all the economics and their cap table. I would imagine at a $4 billion valuation, it's a little late in the game for them
Yeah.
to be able to do that. But I think that to the degree that they reward their creators and treat them not as users, but as creators and producers,
Mm-hmm.
I think even that, and I think, we saw that in, I was in a group, in a collective of folks that later became the Audio Collective, but it started off as a collective that spent a lot of time with the founders. And there seems to be a real olive branch that the founders have said, you know what, these creators have been loyal, they've been putting hours in and producing content. We want to reward them and allow them to have more access and to do more things. And so
Mm-hmm.
remains to be seen. But I think Paul and Rohan got the message, and I think that's what's most important. What I do love about them as founders is they listen. They listen really, really well. They've had to. We've been through, this platform. I think about. I've been on since May, so you can imagine
Mm-hmm.
May through November, right? So I came on right in the middle of George Floyd. So it was, it was an intense moment. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it gave me a lot of power to hold space for conversations that are very difficult in the United States of America in May. Then we moved into the election, right? So then it
Mm-hmm.
was like, even more, velocity of conversations. And so I think what's really been positive about the founders is they've lived through that whole moment where it was
Right.
really tense, right? And I think in the moments of George Floyd, it was bigger than just police brutality. It was sort of a bigger conversation around African Americans and opportunities in business. And I think these kinds of conversations have put Paul and Rohan in a position where they've had to become more effective, more better listeners as leaders, and to sort of reimagine how they probably thought about this. I don't think that
Right.
they imagined that there would be this large influx of creatives, many of whom are black and brown, who are creating the type of impact. Now I know that because I've been working in culture for 25 years. I've been black for 51. So, I certainly knew what would happen when you bring those kinds of force multipliers. But I think for Paul and Rohan, it's been like, wow, this is amazing. And I think one of the reasons that Andreessen Horowitz is a great investor is, Ben Horowitz definitely understands that. He surrounds himself around folks in the culture,
Uh-huh.
whether it's MC Hammer or Fab Five Freddy or Nas. Those are all folks who are also on the cap table for Clubhouse, and were able to get into I would imagine they're on the cap table, by the way. They were able to get in those deals if they were through Ben Horowitz, I think, who is a thoughtful investor and understands the power of culture.
Yeah. Do you so you've mentioned this a couple times, James. The virility, but also the usage of black and brown folks
Yeah.
on Clubhouse. Do you think it's taken off so much for those cultures and those niches of people because of not getting the play or the ability to communicate the way that they would want to on other platforms, or what's your thoughts behind that? I'm curious because I've noticed that too. When I hopped on to Clubhouse, I was like, wow, there's something really going on here, for these folks, but I didn't really understand what was happening. But what are your thoughts behind it?
Well, because I was part of bringing a lot of interesting folks on, that my
Yeah.
thoughts are that is there was an intentionality behind making sure that black and brown creators who have traditionally been don't really get the beta, the test flight
Uh-huh.
invites, right?
Uh,
However, you know. Black culture in this country drives mainstream global culture, so it's
yeah.
it's a it's a good thing to do. It's not just like a charity. It's like the
Yeah.
the what drives culture in this in globally is the contributions of Black and brown creators. So I think what's interesting is there would be no Vine if it wasn't for instance, the contributions of Black and brown creators. I lived in Atlanta for 15 years and, got to see many, I used to call Atlanta the home of the B and the C star, right? It was like, there's famous people, but then there's also like internet famous people. And
Right.
I watched Vine take off on the backs of, young Black talent. And I think this go around for Clubhouse, because of the early access, because of the folks who, folks like myself who were influencing other influencers.
Mm-hmm.
There was certainly like a momentum that was created. And I think it is, yeah, I think that it was a combination of things. I think it's, um, you know, Black people in general are going to view probably, they're going to be able to take something that has no instruction manual and create a use case for it. I
Right.
think that the timing of this of what was happening in terms of the pandemic and the ability to give voice, I think was also not lost. The ability that everybody was there at one time, and it also gave an opportunity for this is what was really special is just rooms where Black folks and white folks were coming together in worlds that would have never come together in real life. And I think it made for richer, deeper conversations when you can involve, all contributions on subjects like healthcare, on subjects like finance, on subjects like, Wall Street, or, subjects like obviously social justice in this country. When you can be in a room where there's a diverse set of people, the world's just a better place. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
essentially part of my business model. I'm both Ashkenazi Jew and Caribbean, right? I'm both slavery and Holocaust. So I live in the skin of one who sits at the table of diversity. And I
Mm-hmm.
just think it's a much better value proposition for companies if you actually can think about diversity with intentionality. And so I think hats off to Clubhouse for having a little bit of foresight to go, oh, I shouldn't just give these test flight invites to my like Silicon Valley white dude friends. We should probably think about how to distribute these test flight invites to a broader set of people, whether that was them or Andreessen Horowitz, because I didn't get a call from Paul and Rohan directly. I got a call from Andreessen.
Uh-huh.
Whoever's decision that was very, very smart. And this platform doesn't hit a $1 billion to $4 billion valuation on the backs of like, 1,000 like, privileged white venture capitalists in Sand Hill Road.
Right. Right. How many users are on Clubhouse now? Do you know?
10 million.
10 million. Okay.
I don't know the number. So there, from what
Roughly.
I heard, there's roughly 10 million, but
Okay.
that's pre Android though. I mean, this is all,
Yes. I mean, it's still, yeah, and
yeah,
still there's so many people that don't even know about Clubhouse, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Do you see it going? Is it getting more popular overseas as opposed to in the United States now? Because it seems like there's just so many international groups that I see an Italian group, I see a Brazilian group, I see all these different groups. I'm just curious. Do you think it's taking hold more overseas than in the U.S.?
Yeah, certainly. My growth has been very intentionally driven by international markets because I chose. So when
Uh-huh.
we produce content, I produce content from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. on purpose because
Mm-hmm.
I'm catching the Good Morning London crowd. I'm catching the Good Morning, Middle East crowd. And so I've been very intentional about, my network is really global. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was very intentional about that. But yeah, to answer your question, the app has hit number one in several markets internationally. And I only see that becoming even stronger as you onboard Android. Um, Brazilians have always been, I ran a digital practice inside of an agency called Ketchum many, many years ago in the beginning of social media. And, the Brazil as a market has always been early, always like voracious appetite,
Mm-hmm.
always, spending a lot of time on platforms. I used to use this platform called Orkut, which was big in Brazil and India. And, I think that it's pretty natural for Brazilians to be on there. And then as you begin to have I think what drives Clubhouse is just having quality moderators. So I think
Mm-hmm.
the important thing is to have, quality Italian, Brazilian, German moderators who can drive more growth. But yeah, I only see that getting bigger. There's been some, in places like the Middle East. I mean, you have government officials on there. We hosted a show around Kuwait, and we had government officials, and we had a royal family, and so yeah, I'm banking on the fact that the international growth is going to continue. So
Yeah, I think so too. Um, When's their estimation when Android it'll will pick up Clubhouse?
I think by the end of May is when we see
Okay, that's coming up
Android.
soon.
Hmm.
Um, for the average person out there that is just new to Clubhouse,
Yep.
and maybe they want to start their own club and build their own network, or they have a small network themselves, or they're an
Hmm.
influencer amongst other micro influencers, like you mentioned earlier. What are some tips you could give to those people on how to grow their network, appropriate ways to use Clubhouse to be a moderator, to run their own club, to run their own groups? What are some thoughts? Because you've probably, I mean, you've seen it all at this point,
Hmm.
right? That's been on
Hmm.
Clubhouse.
Hmm.
I've been in clubs where the moderators aren't that good.
Hmm.
It's just some people want to just hear themselves talk.
Yep.
Maybe there's way too many moderators, and they're all fighting for a voice, and then the people asking questions have a really hard time coming in and just getting a question asked.
Hmm.
What are some like go-to tips you would recommend for the people out there?
I think the first one is a pretty simple one for me. It's one I use myself. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I don't open up rooms just because I can, because I have 2.2 million followers, and I like it is certainly my my intention to not clog up the internet with just opening a room. So I think anybody who's out there listening, it's like, there's a book by a woman named Priya Parker. It's called The Art of Gathering. I spent a lot of time um, in the pandemic, even before I joined Clubhouse. I would say March to May, gathering people in Zoom-like experiences. I was doing Jeffersonian dinners three
Mm-hmm.
times a week in Zoom, gathering 10 to 12 and 15 people, and really thinking about like, what's your intent? What I love about Priya Parker's work is, have an intention for why you're bringing people together. If it's just to hear yourself talk, it's probably not, going to be sustainable. But if you have an intention, I mean, I used to do rooms that were called give get rooms, where it'd be like, hey, what can you give? What do you want to get? So there's real intention, there's real substance in our community. It's not just hosting things. I think we establish ourselves by establishing our intention first and foremost. I would say the second thing that I think we do pretty well is we have stuff going on off of Clubhouse. So everything isn't happening on Clubhouse. Clubhouse to me is the outer rings of the concentric circle, and
Okay.
as you get closer to the Tootsie Pop, that's where the value is.
Okay.
But I certainly look at Clubhouse as like um, an opportunity to build audience, but I don't build community in Clubhouse. I build audience. I do use the closed room feature to do community. So there's a difference between a follower and a member of a club, and
Uh
I do
huh.
utilize the members of authenticated differently than when I just open it up for everybody. Because for
Okay.
me, the metrics aren't my goal. I mean, the metrics are great. It's great for me to DJ. I've been DJing a lot these days. It's great to be able to DJ in front of 2,000, 3,000, 15,000, 20,000. I mean, I've had rooms where 20,000 people come through.
Uh huh.
Or maybe not 20, maybe it's all 10,000. I don't know. But we certainly have had, like, we've maxed out the number of users on the platform, I feel like. And that's cool, but that doesn't really build my ultimate goal, which is to build a real true community of folks.
Right.
And I think it's for me, having an off-campus strategy is everything. So I have a Substack newsletter. I use community.com, which is a text messaging app. And so we're communicating, using, people that text me at 415-843-8100.
Uh huh.
Will be able to be in a sort of back channel. So I really think about the back channel a lot.
Okay.
And then the other thing is when we do produce programming, we're producing it like a show. And it's like I'm not on there for 4 and 5 hours.
Uh huh.
I think there's diminishing returns after a certain point of being on there that long. So we're very much like we're on, we're off, and now I take that back. I do DJ for 5 hours. So when I DJ, I have no off button, unfortunately.
But
But
when you're DJing, you're playing music, right? This
I'm
is
playing
different
music.
than you
Yeah,
hosting a clubhouse. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I try to respect people's time. I try to, we do our
Hmm.
morning show. It's a 2 hour show. It's really meant to, like, bring people up and hear their story. And I think the last piece is just, what we're watching in Clubhouse is the dawning of what I call job titles that don't exist yet. And the idea of being a moderator, different than a podcast host and what you do,
Hmm.
is that I'm crafting the questions. but I'm also looking in the audience and seeing who's in the audience and then bringing people up. I generally don't fill my stage with a ton of people. That's not my style. I don't have like 20 people on the stage because I think it's like too many people
It's a
hogging
lot.
the mic,
Yeah.
and no one really gets a chance to talk. So I keep clean stages. And for those who are not in Clubhouse yet listening to this will probably make more sense when you actually join Clubhouse. But there's basically a stage where there's speakers, and then there's below that there are people who are listening to the speakers, and
Hmm.
essentially people raise their hand and become part of the what I refer to as the DJ booth. Like while I'm DJing, there's people around me and we're throwing questions to people. So I think keeping the stages, and being able to mute and boot bad actors, because it's the internet. There's a ton of people that want to
Hmm.
come on and disrupt. So I'm really quick. I boot. I mute. I give them a warning before they even come on stage that I will punch them in the face and get them kicked off the platform. I don't really mean that, but not. Uh, but I do know the founders, and I put a little bit of fear so that people act right when they come up and respect people's time.
Yeah.
We're doing shows about sex and pleasure and things that are touchy topics. So I think the ability to create a trusted environment where my network, some of them are celebrities, some of them are maybe in the sex and pleasure stuff, women or men who have been through trauma. So I want to make sure that I keep a space where like someone's not going to say something totally out of left field. And I pretty much in those touchy areas, I kind of know everybody. They've been vetted, everyone who's on the stage. And so
Hmm.
those kinds of like things I think are the skill sets of the new moderator, and what I think is actually the dawning of a new social audio host, if you would, who's like watching the door and asking the questions at the same time.
Yeah. Is it so how many so a couple things. Um, when you have your moderators or speakers, generally how many people are you having? Is it just you most of the time, or is it you and a couple other people that are up there as the main speakers, or what do you?
Yeah, it's not just me. I do a monologue sometimes. It can be me and four people. I mean,
Hmm.
I mean, it doesn't. I don't have a set number. I just like to know who's on the stage and have a good sense of who's on the stage. I generally am not bringing like kind of complete strangers, but that's
Okay.
the beauty of having a club. Is when you have a club, you can actually see who from your club is in the house.
Hmm.
It's like, or who's connected to the speakers. So it's a little. I think the Clubhouse folks have done a great job of making it easier for us as moderators.
Hmm.
But I also, I do want to discover new people. So sometimes I'm just like in someone's room listening to people and I'm collecting them. I'm like, oh, that person's really cool. I like their voice. That's great. Oh, I like them. And I may not necessarily follow them, but I'm tracking them.
Yeah.
And I'm identifying voices like, oh, that person would be really great in our room. We should figure out a way to get them in our room.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, is there any rhyme and reason to the topics that you're talking about nowadays, James, or is it just like whatever's interesting to you at the moment? You'll create a club for, or create an event for, or you'll go in and speak as a guest speaker, or
Yeah. No, it is a rhyme and a reason. So
okay.
I advise probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 companies at a time as an equity holding advisor, sitting on the cap table of, 5 or 10 startups. I've worked with a lot of brands, and then now we're starting to make, direct investments from our fund. And so they're generally topics that are connected to the founders that I'm connected to. Things I care about in the world, certainly. The morning show I do is like a sort of me as Jimmy Fallon. So, you know,
Okay.
it's sort of, you know, two people a week who I maybe had calls with. And I'm like, oh, you're amazing. You should be on my morning show. And so
Hmm.
it doesn't really, it's more about the person and their journey and not necessarily the topic on that one. And I would say that the show that we do around sex and pleasure is because I'm an advisor to a company called Comma, which is in the sexual wellness space. And I think she raised 3.2 million in a very difficult category to raise capital in.
Hmm.
And I think that sex is something that should be talked about in open, and it's sort of a taboo subject that we don't spend enough time talking about. We talk about it, it's very intellectual, it's very scientific, it's not just technique, right? We're talking
Right.
about really humanity and how humans relate to each other, and I think that's important. Things I really choose to spend my time on are things I think are going to move the culture forward. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've already sort of plotted my summer of 2022, which I think is going to be the Roaring Twenties meets the Harlem Renaissance meets the Summer of Love of '69. And so, as a hypothesis on where I see the world, that generally colors the kinds of conversations that I want to have in my room, or sort of me being a futurist and looking into the crystal ball and going, what are the things that humanity and culture are going to be discussing, this in the summer of 2022, right?
Right.
And I think that as we move out of this pandemic, there's going to be a lot of creative economy conversations. There's going to be a lot of conversations about how we capitalize businesses, and there's going to be a lot of sex. And I'm really excited for it. I'm here for it.
So it's like every decade we just talk more about sex and right,
Yeah,
or we just become more open about it.
I
You know.
think the more open you become, the less, especially for men, the less creepier we get. Right? With
Hmm.
we've seen an era of bad boy behavior. Right? Just really, and I think the more we're open about sex, the more we talk to kids at an earlier age about sex, we create less perversion and
Yeah.
less perverts. And I think it's actually one of the things I've learned in doing this Sunday show for 6 months, which we've been doing a show on sex for 6 months, is the open dialogue around sex for men and women
Hmm.
creates, I think, a safer place for women and for men
Hmm.
to engage. Right now, it's done even though we think about sex all the time. Probably in doing this interview, you probably thought about sex a couple times, but literally, not with me per se. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
centering myself,
understand.
but but the point is that we think about it all the time,
Yeah.
and yet we don't talk about it openly as a society. And so I've learned a ton about just the importance of talking about it openly.
Yes, absolutely. I actually read a statistic, and I can't verify this, that the countries with the most sexual suppression are also the countries that download the most porn.
I can
Uh,
imagine.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it makes a lot of sense because
yeah.
suppressing all that energy is not a great thing. If people want to listen to that morning show, where's the best? Where do they go to find that?
Well, you can certainly follow me on Authenticated, which is in Clubhouse. It's called
Okay.
Authenticated. So following me gets me there. But the best way is to text me 415-843-8100, and just text Clubhouse to 415-843-8100, and I pretty much notify all of my Clubhouse followers in text message, hey, this is what this week's going to be about. This is the episode, and so forth. We're moving into a series around mental health for
Oh,
Mental
nice.
Health Awareness Month in May, and I'm partnering with Kenneth Cole. So Kenneth and I are doing an entire month of conversations in Clubhouse about mental health. It's something that I care deeply about as a caretaker, someone with mental health challenges. And so we're supporting Kenneth Cole and some other great organizations around Mental Health Awareness Month, which is May.
Amazing, amazing. And then your personal handle on Clubhouse is at Key Influencer. Is that correct?
My personal handle across the interwebs is Key
Is Key
Influencer.
Influencer? Yeah.
Yeah, I snagged that a
That
long
was a
time ago.
that was a good one. That was a good one. So your, and I don't think the business and investments that you have and the following you have, you don't necessarily need. You talked about this, but you don't necessarily need a funnel or a flow for your social media going to. Well, you now have the text app that you're doing, or text messaging, then going and kind of moving people into your community. But if you know what it, what does that kind of look like for you? You're like, we all have an intention for
Hmm.
having a personal brand, right? So for me, it's like, well, we have the
Hmm.
podcast, and events that I go speak at, bring
Hmm.
people to our events and services, and then bring people through our mastermind community, and bring
Hmm.
people through either coaching or courses or our live events or
Hmm.
some of the things that we do. So what's that look like
Hmm.
for you?
Yeah.
Just curious, so people can get some ideas for their own businesses.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, we definitely have a funnel on the flow. It's just,
Okay.
yeah. So for me, we make money in three distinct areas. One is advisory. So I've been a senior marketing executive. I've been, I owned an advertising agency, play in tech. And so we certainly make money advising venture capital firms, startup founders, and brands. Those are kind of the three basic areas. And so
Mhm.
there's certainly like a flow of inbound. I mean, especially now that I hit 2.2 million followers, it's like there's a massive. I just became friends with the CEO of Logitech because he hit me on LinkedIn, and
And
building
that's
a really great relationship with the Logitech family, because of the inbound. So there's certainly that. The second place in which we make money is in content creation.
hmm
And so that is about finding creative voices, folks who are in the creator economy. And so we're looking for, interesting shows or personalities that we can back and build IP around.
okay.
And so that's the second place. And the third, which is what makes, a great investor, is having deal flow. So being able to get great deals, great opportunities in the market. And we're a small fund. We're in no way going to ever be the biggest check on the cap table, but we
hmm
need to get, as a small fund, we need to get on the best deals. And so most of those deals are often taken up by, some of the biggest investors and the fancy investors. We're a new kid on the block with zero financial investing background, trying to compete with lots of other investors, small and big. And our leverage is that we understand marketing and how to build a brand. My partner owns an advertising agency, $50 million in revenue, 70 employees, big clients. So we believe we're different in that most VCs are writing checks. We're like infusing our expertise, our celebrity relationships, our influential relationships, and we're bringing that to the cap table. So it's important. Yeah, I think funnel for us is everything. We have a registration process. So I have a software engineer that
hmm
designed a pretty interesting registration process. So if you text me, you you actually get an automatic reply back, and it's a reg form. And then we're taking the data and we're doing better matchmaking because we go, oh, you went to University of Arizona, somebody in our network went to University of Arizona, or you're into ag tech, this person's into ag tech, and we're using it for better matchmaking, which essentially is what I've been doing in human form for my last 10 years. I'm a connector. I'm always connecting people, but to be able to use software to go, okay, who do I want to connect? And are you a paid member of our
hmm
community, or are you just on the fringes? The way I look at it is sort of software and hardware. So all the content I'm producing, all the things I'm doing in Clubhouse, that's the software of my business. The hardware of the business is my advisory practice, my fund, and
Got
and
it.
the IP we own in content. But the stuff you see me doing, hey, the sex show and the DJing, all that stuff, it's fun. I love it. But it's in the same way Soho House has a software and hardware there, right? Their software is membership community, expensive hamburgers, overpriced matcha tea, but their hardware of their business is real estate holdings from Barcelona to Miami, to New York. And so we see our business very much the same way. Behind me is a marketplace of buyer and seller. And I'm
Yeah.
constantly, because that's all really that's all anything is, whether you're always selling. And 0 to 1, Peter Thiel talks about this idea of, everything is sales. It's a set of either simple or complex sales deals, but it's all sales at the end of the day.
hmm
So yeah, my network is my net worth, and I only exist on the funnels that come. We just are qualifying them at various different levels, and using similar to what you're doing. So we did 4 summits last year. So we do virtual summits, but those summits in 2016 or 2014 to 16 were traveling series that we built called Culture and Code, where we took
Okay.
investors and founders and creatives to Detroit and Miami and DC and Stockholm, and brands paid us to actually build these experiences in cities. And so yeah, we have IP that is about our network, and it's about a traveling group of people. And then we have a membership community. And when we hit 2 million followers, our membership community is $999 a year. We dropped the price because I wanted to open it up to more people
Uh-huh.
who maybe couldn't afford the $1,000 a year, but yet I still want to see who they are because they're the next emerging founder, they're the next emerging investor, they're the
Right.
next emerging executive, and so we wanted to build a funnel big enough so that we could actually scrape and figure out who's who. So you kind of work your way closer to me,
Uh-huh.
to the center of the Tootsie. I'm like Willy Wonka, and then you kind of you go through all these, your Mike TV, and then you're all these.
Uh-huh. How many bites does it take to get to the
Exactly.
center of the Tootsie Pop? Where can people find a community if they want to learn more about the community that you guys have?
Yeah. So you can text me really
That's
415.
the one.
It's yeah it's
Say the
it's
number again. You got to repetition, man.
415 843 8100.
There we go.
And if you text join, you get an automatic link to the community, and we certainly have been taking in new members. It's been great. It's been really cool. We live in Mighty Networks, so that's the platform that we centered our community in. But we've
Hmm.
been dabbling in things like Topia, which we're big fans of. It's a sort of like it's like a clubhouse, but like more spatial design. So you can
Hmm.
cruise around this little world. It's really really cool. So we are always beta. We're like Tom Hanks in the movie Big. We're always sort of playing with like new structures of community. And as soon as we go back into post pandemic life, which we are calling hybrid one and hybrid two, in
Hmm.
hybrid one, we're going to bring folks together in real life. We have a new relationship with Soho House to start producing these clubhouse like experiences in real life in at Soho House Malibu and West Hollywood and
Nice.
downtown. So I'm already on to summer 2022 and thinking about those partnerships that we can start to create to bring these things from Clubhouse, which has been awesome,
Uh-huh.
into real life experiences. We're talking to a hotel partner right now. My show at night is called Room Service. Started because I was missing a good room service, and I'm a guy who likes a swanky, fancy hotel. And so we built a show called Room Service. And so we're already having conversations with hotel partners. And so we see this as the extensions of our community, the extensions of our brand, the extensions
Hmm.
of our experience business, and excited about what's to come.
Nice. You mentioned spinning, working, having the software side of your business and the hardware side of the business, meaning the
Yeah.
outer parts of your business and then the core of it. And as a creator and a podcaster myself, I'm constantly challenged with like creation time
Mm,
versus like most important task or money generating activity
mm,
time,
mm,
right? How do you specifically balance that? Because you're a creator, you seems
mm,
like you have been your entire life,
mm,
and it's a lot. Like I'm constantly torn. We see so many creative, artistic type of entrepreneurs out there that are broke because they're so passionate about the creation. How do you manage that specifically, James?
Yeah, I gave this year over to a concept that I call kairos. The Greeks used to measure time two ways. One is chronos, which is where we get the word chronology,
Right.
and kairos is a spiritual time. It's a spiritual moment, it's a season. And this year I did something really interesting. Is I used to be really stressed by January, 15th because I want to have my to-do list. I actually spent the first 6 weeks in deep surrender, and this might be countercultural to most people, but it is a faith that I had coming into this year that everything was just going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly live in abundance. I live in an abundance mindset. And I didn't really understand what that really meant until I had to really live it out. To live in abundance mindset means you have to actually really live every day in
Yes.
this abundance and be abundance in everything. It's not
Yeah.
just like money. So first of all, I gave myself over to abundance. And I gave myself over to this concept of kairos, which meant that I wasn't looking at the clock the same way. I actually made February 15th my January 1st. And I gave myself permission in the first 6 weeks
Mm-hmm.
to really kind of figure out what this year was going to be about. That led to a series of conversations actually on Clubhouse about the concept of Kairos and
Okay.
the idea of living kairotically. And if you think about it, kids actually are the ones who live most kairotically. They don't care about your bedtime. They're going to play with what they want to play with. So I actually gave myself permission to play. And so actually today, Monday, this is the only thing I've done today from a work perspective, and I hardly call this work. This has been super fun with you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
But I basically gave myself over to Mondays, spending the majority of my time just playing. And just like, and playing for me could be walking on the beach or DJing, but I really had to give myself a release. And I can't begin to tell you, Chris, like it literally, this year has been a game changer when I stop clenching and white knuckling this thing,
Uh-huh.
and my knuckles don't get that white. But
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be able to like not live in fear
Mm-hmm.
and to live in this abundance mindset. And I had to really practice what that meant on an everyday level. So I've committed to Kairos and Kairotic behavior. And the other thing is these are sort of my network does like, yeah, we talk about venture capital and sex and all these, but we also talk about the kind of know thyself things. So my
Mm-hmm.
network did a deep study on Kairos. We're now doing a deep study on the relationship between spirituality and money.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a book called The Soul of Money that we read and a few of us have read. And really the relationship, and it's great. In my network, I have, trust fund people who never really have to work ever in their life. Now, people who didn't grow up like that at all.
Right.
And there's commonalities behind how we were raised and how we view money. And I'm really working hard to get rid of those blockages. How my mother talked about money, how we viewed money. I didn't recognize this till late in life. I mean, when I was in the music business, I made a lot of money at an
Mm-hmm.
early age. And it was just like, it just enabled me to kind of like I was always like, I don't have to go get a real job. I can work in the music business, and I worked my ass off and it was amazing, but I didn't want to go work in one of those like stuffy jobs that my other college friends were working in. I wanted
Right.
to do what I wanted to do. And I thought that money gave me the ability for freedom. I also thought money gave me the ability as a parent to be able to make decisions, right? To be able to go on a trip, to be able to go on a trip with my kids. And I think changing the relationship that we have to money is a freedom that I'm just now experiencing at 51 years old, or
Mm-hmm.
soon to be 51 years old. And looking at the spiritual connotation of money, and there's several works out there that talk about the spiritual relationship to money, I think has been a game changer. So those two things alone this year have given me this freedom of being, you know what, I'm giving myself permission to actually take a couple of hours off. And because I worked in the music too, I think like a songwriter. I think like a rapper. I think like and I've spent enough time in studios to know like when you have writer's block, when you have these things, the best thing to do is just go out and experience life. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Go out and hang out, go out and see people. Don't just
Yep.
sit in a studio. And so
Yep.
I try to like, and it's been difficult in the pandemic living in Los Angeles, but at least like seeing life for me could be like, it could be going on Clubhouse and just having a shooting the shit, having a conversation about whatever. And so I've given myself permission for like playground time. And
Yeah.
I think that's really helped me as a creative, even get more creative.
Yes. Yes. I love that, man. Oh, I was gonna ask you something. I just lost it. The oh, so have you read the book The Surrender Experiment? Have you ever heard
No,
of it?
no.
It's written. I'm reading it right now, and the reason why I ask is it's written by Michael Singer, is a guy.
Oh yeah, sure. I know he is. Yeah.
Yes, he sold
Oh,
a software company for 100 million,
yeah.
and he talks about actually the exact same thing that you're doing. Everything
Interesting.
that he's really created in his life, the vast
Yeah.
majority of important things has come from surrendering when life brings you something. Life brings you lemons, make lemonade, sort of thing. But he
Yeah.
did it through like a deep meditation process, and he built this medical software company up to no, not 100 million, excuse me, it was $1 billion.
Yeah.
Sold it for $1 billion, and now he's just a consultant, investor sort of thing, but and spiritual guru, I guess you could say as well.
You know what's funny is I'm reading his first book right now.
The Untethered Soul, is that it,
Yeah.
or which one?
Uh-huh.
Yes, is it
Yeah.
good? Yeah,
Yeah, it's deep. It's deep. It's
yes,
good. Yeah. So I'll have
yeah.
to read that one next. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, I'm on the opposite trajectory, so I'm going to read the other one next, right? So very cool, yes, and it's so good because it really, and I've been practicing this as well. I just got back from a 2 week trip to Mexico, and we get so tense to like get shit done, right? To work
Yeah.
on, to get our to-do list done, and to be on time, and to
Totally.
to go, and the hustle and the grind, right? And I just, when I was down in Mexico, I was just like, you know what, whatever life brings me, I'm just gonna enjoy it. And I just had one of the best vacations of my life, man. It was just so nice.
Yeah.
Everything that I really wanted to happen without like, trying to really put a hustle into it. Like everything just kind of fell in place and everything
Yeah.
happened, and it was just such an incredible experience. And it came from like reading this book and just,
Mm.
and I practice this on and off, but it's so easy to get back in, especially with our culture in the United States and our lifestyles as entrepreneurs. It's so easy to get back into the hustle and grind of things, right? The 9 to 5 of, or even not even a 9 to 5, the 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. grind and go until we burn ourselves out and crash out. So
Yeah, I think surrender is underrated, and I had to deal with a
mhm.
lot of life things last year with family members going through some real, and I had to really go, okay, I can't really change the situation for them.
Yeah.
All I can do is just surrender to what's going on. I think, yeah, surrender comes at so many points in life, and it's man, it's my theme song for 2021.
Yeah. Amen, man. Amen. James, I think we're gonna wrap everything up there. But
Right.
before we tie things off, is there any last few words you want to say to the listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, to the listeners out there, entrepreneurship is a lonely planet, but I think it works when you build a community, and when you build community as a part of your stack. And I think those things are important both from a spiritual standpoint. It's certainly, thinking about community as part of the stack, but as we're seeing in these new economies that are being created and tokenization of economies, community is also a good thing to have for your soul, and it's a great thing to have for your business. And so I think that it would be great for more people to kind of think before they build a business and prioritize community from day one, and think about what that means. It's no longer social media. I think that's one of the big things from just, even looking at Clubhouse. It's not just about followers, but how do you go beyond followers and audience into community? And I
Yeah.
think community is greater than followers, and we're starting to really see that now in this new economy. So yeah, hats off to everybody out there who's trying to build their own business, or maybe stuck in a cubicle and thinking about building a business. I think this is the greatest days of your life as well as the scariest days of your life. And so,
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and surrender and live
Love it.
chirotically.
I love it, man. I love it. If the listeners want to reach out, learn more about what you've got going on, you can drop that phone number once again or whatever other link you want to, James.
No, mine's easy. I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. I've worked really hard for my SEO, I guess.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, certainly 415-843-8100 is one way to get at us. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Key Influencer. I'm on Instagram at Key Influencer. And the authenticated is all over the internet as well. So I'm pretty easy to find. If you can't find me, you're not working hard enough.
Nice, nice. James, I want to thank you so much again for coming on the show, sharing all
Thank you.
your tips and tricks and wisdom with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
man.
thank you. Appreciate it.
And listeners, we're going to wrap up there. Thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.